Welcome to Amatale's Lab, where lying wives and sneaky girlfriends finally get exposed. From girls' trips that never happen to coworkers who are a little too friendly, we break down every red flag, messy receipt, and suspicious text with humor, shock, and just a little bit of petty. Expect wild stories, dramatic reactions, and satisfying karma as the truth comes crashing through the door. If you love relationship tea, plot twists, and seeing players get played, this channel is your new home. Every single chaotic, jaw-dropping, binge-worthy episode. Hit subscribe and never miss a fresh dose of exposed cheating. Don't forget to check our previous stories. Let's get into it. John Carter met Alyssa Monroe at a summer block party in Cleveland, where the music was loud and the laughter felt easy. Alyssa was the kind of beautiful that made people stare, but what pulled John in was how gentle she was when she spoke, like she took her time with every word. They built a soft life fast, Sunday breakfasts, long walks near the lake, inside jokes that turned traffic into comedy. John worked hard in IT support, steady and proud, and Alyssa did freelance styling and event makeup. Their relationship felt blissful because it was simple, until it wasn't. The first shift was subtle, almost polite. Alyssa started suggesting changes in how John dressed, who he spent time with, and how he should talk to certain people. At first, John thought it was her being playful, helping him level up. Then it became a pattern. She rolled her eyes when his mother called, sighed when he planned to see friends, and counted how long his errands took. When John asked why she was tense, she smiled and said, "Nothing. I'm fine," but her voice carried a warning that made him stop asking. Alyssa's sweetness turned conditional. If John did what she wanted, she was affectionate, hands on his shoulders, laughter in his ear, praise that warmed him. If he didn't, she became cold, distant, and sharp. John began apologizing for things he couldn't name. He started bringing home little gifts to fix moods he didn't create. One night she accused him of flirting with a waitress because he said thank you too kindly. John laughed, thinking it would dissolve the tension, but Alyssa didn't laugh back. She stared like she was memorizing him for a future argument. The real change started the week Alyssa got a message that made her posture stiffen. John didn't see the screen, but he saw her face, an old fear flickering across it. She took the call outside, voice low and quick, then came back in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. After that, she guarded her phone like it was medication. She started taking last-minute gigs at night and coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't John's. If John mentioned it, she claimed he was imagining things. "You're being controlling," she said, and the word landed like a slap. John tried to meet her with patience. He cooked dinner on her busiest days, filled her car with gas, even offered to help her manage her bookings. Alyssa responded by moving the goalposts. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't need reassurance," she said. Then she began correcting him in front of people, making him the punchline. She would squeeze his hand at gatherings, hard enough to hurt, whenever he spoke too freely. Later, she would whisper, "Don't embarrass me again." John started shrinking in his own home without realizing it. When Alyssa suggested they move in together officially, John thought it was a fresh start. He pictured a calmer routine, fewer misunderstandings, more closeness. But the moment his boxes entered her apartment, the tone changed. Alyssa insisted their place had to feel like her brand, and John's things became clutter she tolerated. She complained about his sneakers, his books, even the photos he brought. "You can't be this attached to the past," she said, yet she kept an old framed picture in a drawer and snapped at John if he touched it. John's friends noticed he wasn't around as much. When they invited him out, Alyssa would suddenly need him for something urgent, groceries, rides, a talk that lasted hours. If he went anyway, she punished him with silence afterward, lying in bed facing the wall. John would stare at the ceiling and feel his chest tighten, trying to remember what version of him deserved this. Whenever he asked for respect, Alyssa turned it into an accusation. "So I'm the villain now," she'd say, voice trembling on purpose, until John ended up comforting her. One evening, John came home early because a server outage got fixed faster than expected. The apartment was quiet except for the faint sound of laughter behind the bedroom door, Alyssa's laugh, lighter than the one she gave him lately. John froze. He heard a man's voice, familiar, confident, too comfortable. John pushed the door open, and the room seemed to tilt. Alyssa was on the bed with Devin Price, the ex she'd always described as ancient history. Devin sat up like he owned the place. Alyssa's eyes widened, then narrowed, anger replacing fear in a heartbeat. John didn't yell. That surprised even him. His voice came out calm, almost numb, as he asked a single question: how long? Alyssa grabbed the sheet and snapped, "It's not what it looks like," which would have been funny if his heart wasn't breaking. Devin smirked and said, "Man, don't do this," like John was the one causing a scene. John felt something snap into clarity. He looked at Alyssa and said, "I'm done." Alyssa stood, stepped close, and hissed, "If you try to ruin me, I'll deal with you." John walked out with his dignity trembling, but intact. In his car, his hands shook so badly he couldn't start the engine. He breathed through it, remembering the months of insults, the silent punishments, the way she'd made him doubt his instincts. The cheating wasn't the first wound, it was the final proof. Alyssa called him 10 minutes later, not to apologize, but to control the narrative. "If you tell anyone, I'll make sure you regret it," she said. John recorded the call without thinking, a quiet survival reflex. He didn't know yet how important that recording would become. The next day, John went back with a friend to collect his belongings. Alyssa had already bagged some of his clothes like trash and tossed them near the door. She stood there with folded arms, smiling like she was winning. "You're dramatic," she said. "You never satisfied me anyway." The cruelty was so direct it almost felt rehearsed. When John reached for his laptop, she stepped in front of it. "That stays," she said. "You owe me for everything I put up with." John realized then that her mistreatment wasn't only emotional, it was strategic. She wasn't just angry. She wanted leverage. John moved into a small place across town and told himself to focus on healing. He spoke to a counselor, started running again, and reconnected with friends he'd neglected. The quiet felt strange at first, like his nervous system didn't trust peace. Alyssa didn't let him disappear cleanly. She texted at odd hours, swinging between insults and bait. One message read, "You think you're free?" Another said, "Come talk like a man." John didn't respond. Each time he resisted, the messages sharpened, until they became explicit, threats disguised as jokes. A month later, John met Nia Brooks at a community volunteer event. Nia wasn't loud. She was steady, warm, and observant. She asked questions that made John feel seen instead of examined. John didn't rush into anything, but Nia's presence reminded him what respect felt like. Simple, breathable. When they finally went on a date, it wasn't fireworks, it was relief. John posted nothing online, told very few people, and tried to keep his new happiness private. He didn't realize Alyssa had kept one connection open, a neighbor who still followed John's life like entertainment. Alyssa found out anyway. The next time she called, her tone sounded almost cheerful. "So you replaced me," she said. John didn't defend himself. "I moved on," he replied. Alyssa's cheerfulness dropped into something colder. "You're going to learn," she said. John hung up and blocked her number. That should have ended it. Instead, it escalated. Alyssa began telling mutual acquaintances that John was abusive, controlling, and unfaithful, that she cheated because she was escaping. John heard the rumors in fragments, like smoke seeping under a door. The first plot twist came when John received an envelope with no return address. Inside were printed screenshots, doctored messages that made it look like John had threatened Alyssa. At the bottom was a note in neat handwriting: "I can destroy you." John's stomach dropped. He understood now. Alyssa wasn't just reacting emotionally. She was building a case. John took the envelope to a legal aid office and learned a painful truth. People could weaponize lies the same way they weaponized fists. He started saving everything: texts, voicemails, call logs, and the recording from the night he walked away. Nia urged him to report the threats, but John hesitated. He didn't want to be the man everyone laughed at, the man people assumed was exaggerating. He worried that no one would believe him. Still, he filed an incident report and asked about a protective order. The officer was polite, but non-committal. "If she shows up, call us," he said. John left feeling like he'd been told to wait for something terrible to happen before it counted. He tried to keep living anyway. He took Nia to dinner, smiled for pictures, and prayed Alyssa would get bored. Alyssa didn't get bored. She got louder. One afternoon, she showed up at John's job parking lot, blocking his car with hers. When John asked her to move, she laughed and said, "You're not a victim, John. You're just guilty." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I can make you lose everything. You think you can embarrass me and walk away." John felt the old fear rise, then he felt anger, too. "I'm not embarrassing you," he said. "Your choices did that." Alyssa stared at him with a look that promised consequences. That night, Nia noticed John triple-checking the locks. He finally told her everything. The cheating, the threats, the fake screenshots, and the sense that Alyssa wanted revenge for being left. Nia listened without interruption, then said something John wasn't ready for. This isn't about love anymore. This is about control. The words sat in the room like truth. John realized Alyssa's mistreatment had begun long before the cheating, when she learned she could punish him and he would stay. Leaving wasn't just a breakup. It was him breaking her power over him. The attack happened on a cold Friday evening as John carried groceries from his trunk. He heard footsteps behind him, fast and deliberate. Before he could turn fully, someone shoved him hard. Another punch landed, not cinematic, just brutal and disorienting. He fell, hands scraping the pavement, groceries bursting open like a humiliating mess. Voices swarmed, male voices angry and excited. John caught phrases, "Teach him, you thought, now you learn." He tried to shield his head, struggling to breathe. Pain flared, and for a terrifying moment, he understood he might not get up. A porch light clicked on across the street. A neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, shouted, "I'm calling the police." The attackers hesitated, then got reckless, as if to finish quickly. John's vision blurred. He heard a phone dialing, a door slamming, footsteps pounding down steps. Mrs. Henderson's voice grew louder, steady and furious, describing the scene to 911. Sirens were distant but approaching. The men scattered, sprinting into the dark. John lay curled on the ground, lungs burning, thinking of his mother, thinking of Nia, thinking of how close vengeance had come to becoming a funeral. In the hospital, John learned he had a concussion, bruised ribs, and a fractured wrist. The doctor told him he was lucky. "You got help fast," she said. John knew the truth. He survived because someone cared enough to intervene. When police arrived to take statement, John spoke carefully through swelling and pain. He remembered shoes, jackets, the make of a car. He didn't claim what he couldn't prove. But he did say one name. "Alyssa," he whispered. The officer's expression tightened, not disbelief exactly, but the look of someone realizing the case had a personal motive. The second twist came from Mrs. Henderson. She hadn't only called the police. She had a doorbell camera angled toward the street. It caught the attackers' faces in the porch light and captured a car idling nearby. The footage also caught something else, a woman's silhouette across the street, watching from behind a tree line, phone lifted like she was filming. The police zoomed in. The profile was unmistakable. Alyssa Monroe. John watched the clip from his hospital bed, and his stomach turned, not from pain, but from the cold realization that she had wanted to witness his fear up close. Detectives moved quickly after that. They ran the license plate, pulled cell phone tower data, and interviewed nearby residents. One man cracked under pressure and admitted Alyssa had promised money and payback if they helped. When officers questioned Alyssa, she cried immediately, performing shock. "John is obsessed with me," she insisted. "He's trying to destroy my life." But then they played the recording John had saved, the one where she threatened to deal with him if he spoke up. Her face changed in a way that made even her own story stumble. For the first time, her control slipped publicly. Alyssa's brothers, Malik and Terrence, were arrested alongside 2 other men. The charge list wasn't small: assault, conspiracy, and more. Alyssa was charged as the organizer. The courtroom felt unreal to John. Bright lights, hard benches, strangers turning pain into paperwork. When Alyssa's mother saw John's injuries, she covered her mouth and began crying, not in anger at him, but in shock at her daughter. Alyssa stared at John like he had betrayed her by surviving. Then she mouthed something that looked like, "You'll pay," but the bailiff was already watching her closely. The third twist came from Devin Price, the ex. Under investigation, detectives discovered Devin had been the hidden thread in everything. He wasn't just the man Alyssa cheated with. He had been pressuring her for money, pulling her into old habits, and feeding her paranoia. He had convinced Alyssa that John would expose her and ruin her career. Devin had even helped craft the fake screenshots, because Devin was the type of man who didn't fight clean. When police went to arrest Devin for his role, they found he'd already skipped town, leaving Alyssa to carry the heaviest consequences alone. That discovery changed how people saw Alyssa. It didn't excuse her choices, but it reframed her cruelty as something more complicated than simple spite. Alyssa had been manipulated, and she had still decided to hurt John. In court, the prosecutor described her planning, her presence at the attack, and her intimidation afterward. Alyssa's defense tried to paint her as a scared woman pushed too far. But the video didn't look like fear. It looked like participation. People in the gallery murmured. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others looked at Alyssa with a different emotion creeping in, pity for someone who ruined herself for a man who ran away. John's revenge wasn't fists. It was truth, timed and undeniable. He provided every piece of evidence calmly, the threats, the harassment, the recording, and the way Alyssa had started mistreating him long before he left. He described the slow erosion, how she isolated him, belittled him, and punished him for having boundaries. Then John did something no one expected. In his victim impact statement, he asked the judge to require counseling and community service for Alyssa alongside consequences, instead of the harshest possible sentence. "I want safety," he said, "not destruction." The room went quiet. People didn't know what to do with that kind of restraint. Some expected John to demand maximum punishment. Instead, he demanded accountability with a mirror held up to the whole situation. He spoke about men being afraid to report abuse. He spoke about how shame kept him silent until it almost killed him. He thanked Mrs. Henderson publicly and hugged her in the courthouse hallway. News of the case spread locally, and the story people repeated wasn't only about Alyssa's betrayal, it was about John surviving without becoming cruel. The result was strange. Strangers pitted Alyssa not because she was innocent, but because she looked small next to John's composure. Alyssa's reputation collapsed in a way no rumor could have accomplished. Clients disappeared. Friends distanced themselves. Not out of drama, but out of fear. Fear of her volatility, fear of being pulled into her choices. Alyssa cried in court again, but this time it didn't look like performance. It looked like regret finally finding her. "Devin ruined me," she whispered at one point, and her own mother snapped back softly. "No, baby. You helped." That sentence hit like a gavel. John watched Alyssa's shoulders shake and felt an ache that surprised him. Not love, not forgiveness, but grief for what she refused to become. Months later, John's wrist healed, but the deeper recovery took longer. He and Nia moved carefully, building trust like a house with reinforced beams. John spoke at a community center about coercion and retaliation, telling men and women to document threats and ask for help early. He didn't mention Alyssa's name in those talks, but everyone understood the warning. The last twist came quietly. Devin was eventually caught during a traffic stop in another state, and Alyssa's cooperation helped convict him. People pitted her even more then, because it was clear she had risked everything for a man who would have let her burn. John didn't celebrate. He simply exhaled, finally free. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.